With so many serial killers that have been captured over the years, it can be difficult to determine if a crime was committed by a serial killer, or if it was just the work of a deranged madman in a one-off crime with no connection to others. In these 5 cases, police have tried their best to chase down serial killers who may have never existed. Three mysterious murders took place in Israel between 1962 and 1963. The victims didn't know one another and appeared to have had nothing in common. One was a shopkeeper, another a doctor at a US embassy, and the third a housewife. They didn't know one another, but the acts which took their lives were very similar, leading police to connect the cases. The question at hand wasn't simply who did this, but if the Soviet Union government was involved. The first victim was Moshe Stolro, a 32-year-old disabled man who lived above the store he ran. It was shortly after he closed for the night, on November 15, 1962, when someone took his life with 3 bullets. Robbery was ruled out when the entire day's takings were found on Moshe's person. If this was a robbery gone wrong, it seemed unrealistic that the criminal would leave the money behind, but take care to not leave the bullet shells. There was no evidence police could use to even begin to get an idea of who their killer was. Nobody would come up with any motive for taking Moshe's life other than robbery, and no witnesses saw anything unusual that day. By the time the next victim was killed 5 months later, police were no closer to finding the criminal. The second victim was Dr. Shmuel Yakman, a doctor working at the US Embassy. He was walking alone with his wife after a concert when the same gun used in the previous attack was used to take his life. 3 months later, Deborah Chachkis and her husband were attacked while they slept. Again, the same weapon was used, and again, no evidence was left behind. Deborah's husband was severely injured but survived. However, Deborah passed away. The killings appeared to stop after the attack on the Chachkis, but police were still investigating the crimes. At one point, a man named Levi Neufeld, who had disappeared shortly before the first crime, was suspected. The 19-year-old medical student had survived the Holocaust as a toddler and grew up to be a model student, but suffered from mental health problems as exams grew near. He was found after the crime, having taken his own life, but police determined that he died before 2 of the 3 murders were committed. One possibility or conspiracy that many people subscribe to is that the Soviet government was responsible for the deaths. The Chachkis had visited the Soviet Union a few years before the attack. Officially, this was to visit Deborah's ill mother, but their son later claimed his father was working in secret with the Jewish population within the Union. Dr. Yakman's work at the embassy also supposedly made him a target, though why Moshe would have been the target has never been explained. The case remains a mystery, and journalists are trying to investigate years later but have been told to leave it be. Number 4. The Manchester Canal pusher is something of an urban legend, but one that's been told as fact. So prolifically, it has made many people weary about being around the British city's waterways. The pusher supposedly preys on people walking along the canals in Manchester's city centre, picking victims at random to push into the water and then stopping them from getting out. The criminal's victims range in age, though the majority do appear to be male. Since 2015, many newspapers and websites have talked about the dozens of people who lost their lives in the city canals. Sometimes, the number is as high as 90 people over the course of 11 years. In actuality, the number is much closer to around 35. Of those, the majority have been ruled accidents. Given Manchester's canals are located close to the clubs and bars that make up the city's nightlife, alcohol is often involved. It's usually ruled that the victim fell in themselves while inebriated, but believers in the pusher claim the criminal preys on the drunk because it's easier to make their deaths seem like an accident. As absurd as the theory may seem to be on the surface, there is evidence that at least some of the deaths are the result of foul play. In one case, a 40-year-old man passed away after he was pushed into the canal during a mugging. In another, a cyclist was thrown into the canal by a stranger and was stopped from getting out. His foot became caught in his bike, but he managed to get loose and climb out. The cyclist went to the press with the story, which only made the rumors of the pusher even more real. His description of the attacker was very vague, giving police little to go on. However, if one person was responsible for even the majority of the drownings, they would be one of the most prolific serial killers in UK history. Given that the area is populated with bars, restaurants, and stores, the killer would have to have dodged a lot of CCTV cameras to never be seen walking to or from the attacks, meaning it would be someone who knows the area very well. Number 3. For more than 10 years, police in Austria, France, and Germany chased after what they believed to be one of the most prolific serial killers in world history. The culprit apparently picked their victims at random, working with a variety of accomplices, and their crimes ranged from petty theft to the death of a policewoman. The only thing the crimes actually had in common was DNA samples found at the scenes. Each one was worked on by different police organizations and different forensic teams, making contamination from the investigators impossible. But catching the person that left behind the DNA was like chasing a phantom. The DNA profile showed the culprit to be a woman, yet witnesses to some of the crimes claim a man was behind them. Some of the people who confessed to the crimes claimed the woman police were looking for didn't exist. Police were left clueless, and the mysterious criminal was given the nickname the Phantom of Heilbronn. The first crime attributed to the Phantom occurred in Germany in 1993, when someone took the life of 62-year-old Lieselata Schlenger in her own home. The only evidence police could collect was DNA from the lip of a teacup. In 2001, the DNA was found at 2 more crime scenes. The first was during an investigation into the death of a 61-year-old antique stealer. The second was on a discarded needle that had been used to consume illegal drugs. 4 years later, the Phantom's DNA was found on a gun used to take the life of another man, and in April of 2007, 2 police officers were attacked in a car in Heilbronn. One was killed while the other fell into a coma. When he woke, he had no memory of the killer. The Phantom was accused of the crime after her DNA was found on the police car. Police were only getting more and more confused with each crime. The Phantom was placed on the Germany's most wanted list, and 300,000 euros were offered for information that may lead to her capture. Finally, in 2009, police were able to identify the Phantom. The woman worked at a factory responsible for making cotton swabs that were used to collect DNA. Every swab went through a sterilization process to kill germs and bacteria, but trace amounts of the worker's DNA was left on the swabs. With the advancement in DNA technology, even those trace amounts were able to be picked up and tied the woman to countless cases across Europe. Many of the crimes have since been solved without the use of the Phantom's DNA, but the outcome served to reveal a serious oversight in forensic investigations on an international level. Number 2. San Juan del Sur is a popular tourist destination in Nicaragua, situated on the coast of the Pacific Ocean and close to numerous picturesque beaches. But at least one person in their town is hiding a dark secret, and some residents fear they may have a serial killer in their midst. Officials were keen to deny the rumors. They highlight that of the 9 people whose deaths were attributed to the San Juan del Sur psychopath, 7 may have had their cause of death ruled as accidental or natural causes. Of course, this hasn't done much to calm those who believe in the serial killer theory. Given San Juan del Sur relies on tourism, it's easy to see why believers might think the government is covering up the truth. The crimes took place between 2000 and 2002, ending with the death of Jose Antonio Castillo in March of 2002. Jose was 26 years old and worked as a photographer. The day before his body was found, he told his wife he was going to work, leaving her and his 5-month-old baby behind. What the job was exactly is unclear, but Jose ended up at a party that evening. He left in the early hours of the morning, taking his bike and heading off in the direction of his home. Later that morning, his body was found. At first, police believed it was a tragic accident or a hit and run, but further investigation found Jose's injuries didn't match being hit by a car. Robbery was ruled out as the motive, as his expensive photography equipment was found in his backpack. Police spoke to people at the party and Jose's friends and family, but nobody could come up with anyone who would want to do this to him. He was well liked and had no enemies, and nobody saw the incident take place, so police couldn't come up with any suspects. The incident came only months after the suspicious death of Jose Casimiro Salas Chavez. The 52-year-old was found on a riverbank on New Year's Eve. He had drowned but also suffered injuries which suggested he may have been attacked beforehand. However, this was never proven, and it was possible he had sustained the injuries falling into the water. Only one of the other victims had any visible injuries. Many had their deaths chalked up to alcohol poisoning or an accident. Only one person has ever been charged in relation to the deaths, though he was later released due to a lack of evidence. If one person was responsible for all the deaths, he or she has either stopped or gotten much better at making their crimes look like an accident. Number 1. The Smiley Face Killer, or Killers, is a possible serial killer or organized crime gang that may be preying on college-age white men in major cities across the United States. The theory is considered little more than a conspiracy theory for some, and it's not surprising film producers jumped on the theory to create works of fiction. But the possibility that one organization, or even one person, could be responsible for the deaths of hundreds of young men is too fascinating for many in the true crime community. The story starts innocently enough. A group of college students go on a night out. They consume alcohol but no illegal drugs. One young man becomes detached from the group and falls into a body of water. Nobody notices, and sometime later, his body is pulled from the water. It's a tragic accident, but officially just an accident. Not everybody believes this story, though. Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte are 2 former New York police detectives responsible for investigating the drownings of dozens of young men whose deaths they believe to be suspicious. According to the detectives, many deaths ruled as accidental have discrepancies. The death of Dakota James highlights the reasons behind Gannon and Duarte's theory. Dakota was 23 years old when he went missing in January of 2017. He was a relatively popular young man with a good job, getting ready to start a new term at college. He and his group of friends went for a night out in downtown Pittsburgh. At the end of the night, Dakota walked home alone and was last seen near the Allegheny River. Dakota's parents knew something was wrong as they learned he was missing. Police waited 5 days before getting involved. They thought he had gone down to the river to relieve his bladder and fallen into the river. Due to the cold temperatures, he would have gone into shock within moments and drowned. It would be 40 days before Dakota's body was found, 10 miles downriver from where he had supposedly fallen in. His body would have had to have passed through a dam to get to where it was found, and he supposedly had been in the water for weeks. According to Gannon and Duarte, the condition of his body wasn't consistent with this theory. Gannon and Duarte theorized Dakota was drugged and kidnapped the day he vanished. He could have been held for several days or even weeks before being killed and dumped into the water close to where he was found. Dakota's parents believe there was foul play involved, but there's no investigation into his death. Gannon and Duarte propose he was a victim of the Smiley Face killer. The killer or killers got their name from smiley face graffiti found near the bodies where the victims disappeared from. Given the supposed victims have been found all over the US, it seems unlikely to have been the work of one person. Even an organization would need to be extremely large or secretive to have committed so many crimes with no clear reason or connection beyond a piece of graffiti. However, it's unlikely the theory will ever be completely debunked. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.